Dr. Melanie Kaspar, affectionately known as Mel, was born on July 8, 1966, in Lakewood, Colorado, and grew up in Nacogdoches, Texas. She graduated from Texas A&M University in 1988 and later earned her MD from UT Southwestern, where she also completed her anesthesia residency. Mel further specialized by completing a transplant fellowship at Baylor. At the age of 55, she lived in Dallas, Texas, with her husband John, whom she had met during her time at Texas A&M. Mel was a whirlwind of energy and purpose, deeply dedicated to her work as an anesthesiologist and her life outside of medicine. She was known for her integrity, authenticity, and unique sense of style. Whether putting patients at ease, walking her dogs, cooking, or spending time with friends, Mel approached life with intensity and care. In 2022, Mel and her husband John were enjoying life together with their beloved dogs Tripper and Shiner. However, everything changed on June 21, 2022. Feeling dehydrated, Mel took home an IV bag of saline from Baylor Scott and White Surgicare in North Dallas to rehydrate herself. Shortly after administering the IV, Mel suffered a fatal heart attack. Her death shocked John, who was devastated and confused as to how his seemingly healthy 55-year-old wife could pass away so suddenly. 2 months later, a medical examiner revealed that Mel had died from a lethal dose of bupivacaine, a powerful nerve-blocking agent typically injected into the spinal cord during medical procedures. This revelation turned her death into a criminal investigation. On August 24, 2022, an 18-year-old patient named Jack underwent routine surgery for a deviated septum at the same surgical center. Midway through the procedure, the teenager experienced a spike in blood pressure and severe respiratory distress, forcing the surgery to be halted. He survived, but required hospitalization for several days. This alarming incident prompted the surgical center to temporarily pause operations and prompted investigators to take a closer look at the facility. During their investigation, authorities discovered puncture marks in the plastic packaging of 2 IV bags from the facility. Lab tests confirmed the bags contained a dangerous cocktail of drugs, including bupivacaine, epinephrine, and lidocaine. Surveillance footage soon revealed the culprit, 59-year-old anesthesiologist Dr. Ronaldo Rivera Ortiz Jr. On August 4, 2022, cameras captured Ortiz retrieving an IV bag, placing it in the warming bin, scanning the empty hallway, and walking away. Shortly after, a 56-year-old woman undergoing cosmetic surgery experienced cardiac arrest. On August 19th, Ortiz was seen again on surveillance footage hiding an IV bag behind a paper folder before swapping it into the warming bin. Within an hour, another patient suffered complications. In total, the facility recorded 10 unexpected cardiac emergencies between May and August 2022, all tied to tampered IV bags. Investigators uncovered that the tampering began shortly after Ortiz was informed on May 24, 2022, of a disciplinary inquiry regarding his alleged deviation from standard care during a prior procedure. The first cardiac emergency occurred just days after this notification. Ortiz's background revealed a troubling history of violence and professional misconduct. He received his medical license in 1991, but his career was marked by repeated incidents. In 1995, Ortiz was arrested for assaulting his spouse. In 2005, another partner filed an emergency protective order against him, and in December 2014, he was arrested for assaulting an ex-girlfriend. That same year, a neighbor, Roxanne Bogdan, helped Ortiz's ex-girlfriend move out after a domestic dispute. Ortiz blamed Roxanne for the breakup, and in April 2015, he retaliated by shooting Roxanne's dog. Witnesses later testified that Ortiz frequently shot rabbits in his yard, and Roxanne's dog had been targeted multiple times for barking. He was convicted of misdemeanor animal cruelty, sentenced to 25 days in jail, and placed on 2 years of community supervision. Despite his criminal record, Ortiz continued practicing medicine. In 2020, the Texas Medical Board placed him on administrative supervision after a patient nearly died under his care. Investigators also discovered that Ortiz had been reprimanded in 2018 for failing to notify hospitals about his animal cruelty conviction. At another clinic, Ortiz had been written up more than 30 times for various issues, and at Dallas Regional Medical Center, he aggressively confronted the former director of surgery, Jeremy Johnston, during a workplace dispute. On September 14, 2022, Ortiz was arrested and charged with tampering with a consumer product, causing death, and intentional drug adulteration. In April 2024, he was convicted on multiple counts, including 4 counts of tampering with consumer products, resulting in serious bodily injury, 1 count of tampering with the consumer product, and 5 counts of intentional adulteration of a drug. On November 20, 2024, Ortiz was sentenced to 190 years in federal prison, with the judge stating that his actions were tantamount to attempted murder. In 1990, 46-year-old John Sumpter and his sister, 43-year-old Pamela Sumpter, lived together in an apartment in Stone Mountain, Georgia. On July 15th, their lives were tragically cut short in a horrific act of violence. In the middle of the night on July 15th, 1990, Pamela showed up at a neighboring apartment, bloody and asking for help. When police arrived, they found John fatally stabbed to death inside the apartment and Pamela in critical condition. She said that a man her brother had shown up with stabbed her brother to death before attacking and sexually assaulting her. The only information she knew about the man was that he went by Eddie or Al, was new to the area, and had recently moved there from Detroit, Michigan. Thankfully, they were able to collect biological DNA from a sexual assault kit before Pamela tragically succumbed to her injuries 3 weeks later on August 5, 1990. For over 3 decades, the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2022, Georgia began reanalyzing DNA from sexual assault kits predating 1999. By February 2023, a male DNA profile was generated and uploaded to the state DNA database, but no matches were found. A few months later, Pamela and John's case was selected for advanced DNA testing. Using genetic genealogy, the suspect was finally identified as 55-year-old Kenneth Perry. Investigators located Perry in Loganville, Georgia, and obtained a new DNA sample from him. The sample confirmed a match to the DNA collected from Pamela's sexual assault kit. It also matched a 1992 sexual assault case in Detroit. He was arrested in June of 2024 and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder for the deaths of Pamela and John. As of January 2025, he is still in custody awaiting trial. Mary Robin Walter was born in Kingman, Kansas on April 27, 1956. In 1974, she married Douglas Walter, a fellow Kingman native, and the couple moved to Great Bend in 1976. By 1980, Mary was 23 years old, a nursing student at Barton County Community College, and worked at Great Bend Manor, a local hospital. She lived with her 24-year-old husband, Douglas, and their 5-year-old daughter, Pamela, in a mobile home near the entrance to the Great Bend Airport. Mary was described as an upbeat and friendly individual, passionate about helping others in the medical field. Unfortunately, on January 24, 1980, a horrible tragedy occurred. Mary failed to pick up Pamela from the babysitter after her classes that day. Around 7 p.m., Douglas returned home from work with a friend, unaware that Mary had missed her classes and had not picked up their daughter. Inside the mobile home, Douglas made a horrific discovery. Mary had been brutally murdered. She was found lying in bed, having suffered nearly a dozen gunshot wounds. The killer had even reloaded and emptied the gun twice. A .22 caliber handgun, later identified as the murder weapon, was found at the scene. An autopsy determined that she was killed between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. that day. Mary was found wearing a robe, and with no signs of forced entry, theft, or sexual assault, investigators believed she knew her killer. Witnesses reported seeing her earlier that morning, taking Pamela to school before 8 a.m., driving alone in the city, and visiting the service station where her husband worked shortly before 9 a.m. Investigators interviewed multiple witnesses and identified several suspects. Among those suspected was Stephen Hanks, a 25-year-old neighbor who had a history of violent crimes, including aggravated robbery, aggravated battery, and attempted sexual assault. However, without physical evidence to tie him to the crime, the case would go unsolved for over 44 years. In 2022, the Barton County Sheriff's Office reopened Mary's case, reviewing hundreds of documents and re-examining evidence collected since 1980. Some files were incomplete or missing, but fresh scrutiny of old information and new interviews revealed overlooked details critical to the investigation. Despite no DNA evidence being found, the renewed investigation pointed again to Stephen Hanks. Finally, in December 2022, 70-year-old Hanks was arrested and charged with second-degree murder solely based on circumstantial evidence. In August 2023, he agreed to a plea deal that forced him to admit to the crime, and he was subsequently sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Mary's murder marked the oldest cold case in Kansas to be solved and result in a conviction. Morgan Bauer was born on April 13, 1996, and graduated from Central High School in Aberdeen, South Dakota in 2014. On February 12th, 19-year-old Morgan called a ride with a friend from Aberdeen to Minnesota to catch a flight bound for Atlanta, Georgia. She was looking for new opportunities and wanted to start fresh, but unfortunately, the move would prove to be nothing but a nightmare. She initially arranged to stay with a man she had met on Craigslist in exchange for housekeeping work. However, within 2 days, Morgan was allegedly kicked out of the man's home and began staying in motels. She then got a job dancing at the Top of Gainesville adult nightclub in Gainesville, Georgia. She stayed in contact with her mother and friends back home until all communications suddenly stopped on February 25, 2016. Morgan was last seen that night leaving her job at the Top of Gainesville nightclub. She left the club with a coworker of hers and the coworker's boyfriend, who later dropped her off at the Citgo gas station at 3251 U.S. Highway 278 in Covington, Georgia. Once there, surveillance footage showed Morgan getting into a green Eclipse with an unknown driver. Her final Instagram video, posted on the same day, showed Morgan walking with an unidentified man visible in the background. After that, she was never seen alive again. She remained missing for 7 years until July 27, 2023, when evidence that the FBI and local law enforcement had obtained led them to search a property at 2 Broad Street near the Yellow River in Porterdale, Georgia, less than a mile from where she recorded her final Instagram video. There, they found human bones, which were later confirmed to belong to Morgan. She had sadly been strangled to death. Following her murder, her body was dismembered and burned in an attempt to conceal the crime. In August of 2023, investigators announced 2 suspects in the case, Jonathan Alexander Warren and Caitlin Goebel. Warren was arrested in Los Angeles and charged with Morgan's murder and additional crimes related to the case. In a shocking confession, he admitted to performing sexual acts on Morgan after she was dead. Goebel was located in Peoria, Illinois, and was also arrested and charged with concealing a death and tampering with evidence. In October, she was also indicted on murder charges. While most of the details of the night remain unknown, including the motive behind the murder, investigators allege that both Warren and Goebel took part in strangling Morgan to death with their hands. In January 2024, Warren pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including malice murder, tampering with evidence, concealing the death of another, and sex acts on Morgan's body. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At this time, Goebel's case is still ongoing. As of January 2025, most of Morgan's remains have yet to be located. Rachael Leigh Anderson was born on June 11, 1969. She was a 40-year-old mother of 4 living in Moscow, Idaho. Rachael had recently separated from her husband, Charles Capone, following a brief and tumultuous 3-month marriage. In January 2010, she filed for divorce, citing Capone's abusive and controlling behavior. She noted that he even tried to strangle her on December 27, 2009. At that point, Capone began harassing and stalking her. He also damaged her car by breaking her back windshield and slashing her tires, in addition to sending disturbing messages. While Rachael never caught him in the act, she was certain it was him. Capone had a long criminal history dating back to 1985 and a history of violent behavior towards women. He was also prohibited from possessing a firearm since he was a convicted felon. In 1997, he allegedly threatened to break into the home of a Moscow doctor. He threatened to sexually assault the doctor and her daughter, and then said he would take his own life. He also threatened to kill his ex-wife in 2006. As the threats toward Rachael worsened, she began to fear for her safety, and on Friday, April 16, 2010, she contacted Captain Dan Halley of the Assiniboine County Sheriff's Office to discuss the ongoing issues. Captain Halley cautioned her to stay away from Capone, warning that he could become violent. Despite this warning, Rachael went to Capone's repair shop, the Polaus Multiple Services, to drop off the white GMC Yukon that she had been borrowing from a friend of Capone's and pick up her car. However, when she arrived, she became upset after learning her car wasn't ready. After that, she was never heard from again. When Rachael failed to show up for work on Monday, her daughters reported her missing. During an interview with Capone on April 20th, he admitted to making the harassing phone call to Rachael. He also told investigators that Rachael ran off with a guy named Vince after buying beer with Capone's debit card. The following day, on April 21st, the borrowed GMC Yukon was discovered abandoned at a Dynamart in Lewiston, Idaho, near a Greyhound bus station. Inside the vehicle, investigators found her cell phone and purse. Law enforcement executed a search warrant at Capone's business and uncovered suspicious items, including several tarps, one of which had been newly purchased shortly after Rachael's disappearance. Then, on May 6, Capone was arrested for a federal firearm violation unrelated to Rachael's disappearance. Meanwhile, the evidence against him was quickly mounting. Cadaver dogs had alerted to the presence of human decomposition in the Yukon, and human blood was detected on items in the vehicle. DNA from both Rachael and Capone was found on a latex glove tip inside the vehicle. Witnesses came forward with incriminating testimony, including one individual who claimed Capone had offered him $10,000 to kill Rachael for her life insurance money. In April 2013, Charles Capone and his friend David Stone were arrested and charged with Rachael's murder. While in jail, Capone allegedly confided to cellmates that he had poisoned Rachael by slipping sleeping pills into her beer before disposing of her body. However, Stone provided a different account of the events leading to Rachael's death. According to Stone, on the day Rachael came to the shop, he saw Capone step outside to speak with her. Shortly after, Stone heard a commotion and went outside to find Capone strangling Rachael. Stone claimed she was still alive at that point, but when he asked Capone what he was doing, he was ordered to go inside and retrieve a tarp. When Stone returned with the tarp, Rachael was already dead. Stone said they wrapped her body in the tarp and secured it with a chain before driving to Lewiston and throwing her body off a bridge into the river. Despite this account, Stone later told a cellmate that investigators would never find Rachael's body because she wasn't actually in the river. While investigators believe much of Stone's story aligns with the evidence they uncovered, it remains unclear whether Rachael's body was truly disposed of in the river. In the end, Stone later pleaded guilty to failure to notify law enforcement of a death and agreed to testify against Capone. In September 2014, Charles Capone was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sadly, as of January 2025, Rachael's body has never been found.